and the Russians obviously would never intervene directly against the Israelis. That could never happen.
Well,
But
I disagree with that.
but nonetheless, they looked after their own interests. It was understood. But now Russia and Turkey see themselves somewhat sharing the position, even though the Turks are much stronger in their language. And the Russians obviously would never intervene directly against the Israelis. That could never happen. Uh,
Well,
but
I disagree with that. I think that could happen.
really,
Oh, yes, and directly against us. I think that's a mistake to assume that. But Russia isn't going to come in anytime soon. You know, there's an old proverb about the Russians that people in Eastern Europe repeat from time to time. The Russians are slow to mount, but when they do, they ride fast. In other words, the Russians are cautious. They do not move recklessly as we do. They think things through. They look at their own interests and the interests of those around them. The Turks and the Russians, I sat down recently and tried to count the number of conflicts and wars that the Russians and Turks fought against each other. It was somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 or 60. So there are no illusions about the past, and Russian and Turkish interests are not identical, but they have managed to come to solutions in the Caucasus, and they have come to solutions down in Ossetia, in southern Ossetia, and they've worked together when it has been necessary to do so. And Mr. Putin was very helpful to Mr. Erdogan in internal crises when we certainly did nothing. So I think they are capable of putting aside their differences. But one of the things that worries me is there's a tendency in Washington to regard Mr. Erdogan as just a blowhard. And he's not. He's very serious. There's a reason he's still in power after all of these years. And he's poured a lot of money into the Turkish military. So he's not bluffing. And I think we thought that Mr. Putin was bluffing for many years when he continued to tell us what he would or would not tolerate. So I think the problem now is not so much what will they do. I think we know what they will eventually do if pushed hard enough. The question is, what are we going to do? What are we going to do to prevent it? Syria could become a very useful highway for Turkish forces to move very rapidly from one end of Syria to the other and reach the Golan Heights in the space of 12 to 18 hours with hundreds of thousands of troops. And Mr. Assad in Damascus and his government are not going to stand in the way, given the situation that is developing in the region, because they too are Muslims. They may be different, they may not share all the same views, but like the Iranians, they can agree with the Turks on what should happen to Israel if Israel does not stop what it's doing right now. So I think we should not underestimate the readiness of the Russians to back the Iranians and potentially cooperate with the Turks against Israel and the United States in the Mediterranean. In fact, I would go one step further. If you talk to anyone in Russia who is familiar with the situation, knows the Russian armed forces, they will tell you that the Russians would like nothing better than to send some of our ships to the bottom in the Mediterranean. Just imagine you're a Russian and you look at what we have tried to do to them in Ukraine. You listen to the stupid, utterly incautious statements made by people like President Biden and the Secretary of State Blinken and a host of other people, Sullivan, fools in the Senate, saying, well, the Ukrainians are killing Russians. The more they kill, the better. What kind of a remark is that? Since when do we hate Russians? It's absurd. And the Russians have not forgotten those things. And if the opportunity presents itself to do serious damage to us, they'll take it. And remember, we still have to project power 6,000, 7,000 miles away from North America. And projecting that power is not easy, it's expensive, it's difficult, and it's fragile. If Russia comes into the war in any way, shape, or form, they have submarines that can operate in the Atlantic and prevent anything we want to send in terms of reinforcement to the Middle East from ever reaching it. We need to think. Frederick the Great once said, don't plan for what you think the enemy will do. Plan for the worst thing your opponent can do to you. he was right. We're not thinking about that.
Yeah, I think you're right about
And yeah, man, there you have it, man. This is retiree Colonel Douglass McGregor, a very highly respected general and defense secretary for Trump administration, and you know, and if he's an Edomite or he's not an Edomite, I'm gonna tell you one thing: he keeps it real, man, and he tells you the bitter truth. All right, I'm gonna just get a scripture and close it out real quick. Early morning plantation, um, shalom to the brothers, to the brotherhood, to the hopeful elect out there, and the elect lady. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone. So, as you heard, man, you had the other guy made a statement that Russia's not gonna just intervene into the Israeli situation, but he said, no, you're mistaken. This thing is going to happen. The scripture said the least of the flock should draw them in. And it seems like we've been going into that scripture a lot because eventually we know that's going to happen. All right. Therefore, hear ye the counsel of the Lord Yahweh that he have taken against Babylon and his purposes, that he have purpose against the land of the Chaldeans. Surely the least of the flock should draw them out. Surely he shall make their habitation desolate and with noise. So, eventually the prophecy will be fulfilled. And the noise of the taking of Babylon, the earth is moved, and the cry is heard among the nations, man. So, we're approaching that time. This is World War III. It's going to get it. It's going to reach its peak. So, hey, call on Yahweh Shem Yahushua. Just another update on war news and what's going on. Stay on your watch, brothers. And stay prayed up. Hey, shalom.